Causes. 1. What can cause a fire in the cargo hold? A fire in the cargo hold may be caused by undeclared dangerous goods, lithium batteries, and an electrical short circuit. 2. What problems do birds cause near airports? Birds may cause bird strikes during takeoff or approach, engine ingestion, and impacts to the windshield, leading edge, radome, and other structures, which may result in structural damage and degraded performance. 3. What may cause electrical failure? Electrical failure may be caused by a short circuit, battery failure, lightning strikes, or electrical overload. 4. What can cause engine vibration? Engine vibration may be caused by ice accumulation, material fatigue, poor maintenance, unlawful components, and bogs parts. 5. What happens when flying into a cumulonimbus? When flying into a cumulonimbus, the consequences may be severe turbulence, strong updrafts and downdrafts, icing, hail, lightning, and heavy precipitation. Conceptual. 6. Why is the use of ICAO phraseology important? ICAO phraseology is important because it standardizes communication between pilots and air traffic controllers worldwide, reducing ambiguity and misunderstandings and improving flight safety. 7. How do pilots learn to use standard phraseology in English? Pilot learns to use standard phraseology in English during initial flight training, during simulator sessions, and in real flight operations. 8. How does a flight simulator help a pilot to train for emergencies? A flight simulator helps a pilot to train for emergencies because it improves knowledge, handling, hones skills, and develop in a safe environment while practicing in realistic scenarios. 9. How important is it for a pilot to study and understand meteorology? It is crucial for a pilot to study and understand meteorology because, before starting a flight, pilots must plan fuel consumption, route, in order to make good decisions and operate safely. 10. Why do pilots need to take medical exams? Pilots need to take medical exams because it is essential to ensure they remain physically and mentally fit to operate an aircraft safely, usually on a yearly basis, all performed at an aeronautical medical clinic. 11. What does a pilot's medical exam consist of? A pilot's medical exam consists of vision tests, hearing tests, cardiovascular evaluation, and blood tests. For pilots over 50 years old, it includes treadmill tests, all performed at an aeronautical medical clinic. 12. Is GPS a completely reliable means of navigation? Why? GPS is indeed reliable and accurate means of navigation. On the other hand, it can sometimes suffer interference, so pilots need to be prepared to revert to conventional navigation if necessary. 13. What would air traffic management be like without GPS navigation? Air traffic management would be less precise without GPS navigation because controllers would need to increase separation between traffics and position reports to maintain safe distances. 14. What makes a briefing effective, in your opinion? In my opinion, a briefing is effective and crucial because it shares information between crew members about threats and special procedures. It is the best way to align all information before the flight. 15. What makes a great flight instructor, in your opinion? A great flight instructor, in my opinion, has good communication skills, be patient, demonstrates good decision-making, and applies CRM during training. 16. Please describe a good pilot. A good pilot, in my opinion, operates the aircraft safely, applies good CRM, and follows the manufacturer's and airline's policies and procedures. 17. What makes an airport good for pilots? An airport is good for pilots when it has long and wide runways, good navigation systems, approach and departure procedures, and comfortable terminal and ground support. 18. What is CRM and why is it important in aviation? CRM is indeed important in aviation because it improves synergy, reduces human error, and enhances flight safety. 19. Why is English important for pilots? What about other languages? English is essential and important for a pilot because it is the standard language of aviation. All international communication are standardized in English. However, other languages can be useful locally in domestic operations. 20. What are the biggest challenges in a pilot's career? The biggest challenges in a pilot's career are managing fatigue during long flight periods, long time away from family, and maintaining proficiency through regular training every year. 21. Why is simulator training so important for pilots? A flight simulator helps a pilot to train for emergencies because it improves knowledge, handling, hone skills, and develop in a safe environment while practicing in realistic scenarios. 22. What do you predict for the Brazilian aviation market? In my opinion, the Brazilian aviation market will grow because the government will invest in airport infrastructure, build new terminals, develop longer and wider runways, and improve air traffic services. I am very confident this will occur in the future. 23. What will communication between pilots and ATC be like in 10 years? Communication between pilots and ATC will be more precise in 10 years because of increased use of CPDLC and ADSB, which will reduce voice communication, workload, and misunderstandings. 24. How do you think Brazilian aviation will change in the near future? Brazilian aviation will change in the near future because the government will invest in infrastructure and technology, including new airports, longer and wider runways, modern and comfortable terminals, and approach and departure procedures. 25. What needs to be improved in Brazilian aviation in the future? Brazilian aviation needs to improve training centers, airport infrastructure, and air traffic surveillance systems. 26. How do you think Brazilian aviation regulations will change? Brazilian aviation regulations will develop every day, and the best way to keep up with this evolution is by aligning with FAA regulations from the United States. 27. Do you think we will fly without pilots in the future? I don't believe we will fly without a pilot in the future because unexpected situations require human judgment to make safe and effective decisions during the flight. 28. How do you think technology will change aviation? Technology will change aviation because it will increase automation, reduce cockpit workload, enhance safety procedures, and improve situational awareness. 29. How do you see aviation worldwide 20 years from now? Aviation worldwide will be better and more efficient in 20 years because technology develop, expanded airport infrastructure, and improved training standards. 30. How do you think cockpits will be like in 20 years? Cockpits will be more sophisticated in 20 years because technology will reduce pilot workload, improve system integration, and make operations more efficient and comfortable. 31. Why is readback so important? Readback is essential and a standard procedure in aviation because it confirms correct communication between ATC and pilots, reduces misunderstandings, prevents errors, and minimizes ambiguity. Comparison. 32. How is executive aviation different from airline aviation? Executive aviation is more flexible and usually allows pilots to spend longer periods with their families. On the other hand, airline aviation follows strict schedules, rigid SOP, and less family time. 33. What's the difference between the captain's and the co-pilot's responsibilities? The captain has the final authority and overall responsibility for the flight. On the other hand, the co-pilot supports the captain by monitoring systems, handling communications, and assisting in checklist. 34. What's the difference between V1 and V2? V1 is the takeoff decision speed, at which the pilot decides to continue or reject the takeoff. On the other hand, V2 is the safe climb speed that the aircraft to climb safely to a safe altitude after an engine failure. 35. Is GPS completely reliable? Why? GPS is indeed reliable because it provides accurate and precise navigation. On the other hand, it can sometimes suffer signal interference, so pilots must be prepared to complete the navigation using conventional aids. Pilot history. 36. How did you become interested in aviation? I became interested in aviation when I was young. My father took me to the airport, and we flew over Blumenau City, which made me very happy at that moment. After that experience, I decided to look for a flight school and start an aviation course as my career path. 37. Have you ever considered changing careers? I have never considered changing my career because from the beginning I was confident in my choice and decided that aviation would be my profession for life. 38. What advice did your instructor give before your first check ride? Before my first check ride, my instructor gave me some important advice. He told me to stay calm, remember the basic actions, aviate, navigate, and communicate, and never skip the checklist or the QRH, especially during abnormal or emergency situations. 39. What were the best pieces of advice your flight instructor gave you? So, I remember when my instructor gave me some important pieces of advice. He told me to stay calm, remember the basic actions, aviate, navigate, and communicate, and never skip the checklist or the QRH, especially during abnormal or emergency situations. 40. What was the most difficult situation you experienced during a flight? The most difficult situation I faced was during a flight from Aroxa to Joinville when I lost the electrical system near Criado International Airport. I decided to divert to Criado and landed under low visibility conditions, which was a very stressful situation in my career. 41. Have you had malfunctions or emergencies while flying? Yes, I have had an electrical malfunction while flying from Aroxa to Joinville. I lost the electrical system near Criado International Airport, so I decided to divert to Criado and landed under low visibility conditions, which was a very stressful situation in my career. 42. What was the most challenging simulator scenario you practiced? The most challenging simulator scenario I practiced was a dual hydraulic system failure during flight. I had to plan and execute a landing on a short runway, reviewing all procedures and configurations before landing. For me, this was the most challenging scenario I faced in the simulator. 43. Please describe your first solo flight. My first solo flight was a long time ago, in 1992. I was flying with my instructor over Joinville Airfield when, at a certain moment, he asked me to stop the aircraft on the taxiway. Then he left the aircraft and told me to continue alone. At that moment, I felt very excited but also a little afraid. I took off and flew over Joinville City and the Joinville Airfield for a short period, about 15 minutes. After that, I landed safely. 44. What motivated you to become a pilot? My dad, of course. I became interested in aviation when I was young. My father took me to the airport, and we flew over Blumenau City, which made me very happy at that moment. After that, I decided to look for a flight school and start an aviation course as my career path. 45. What was the first aircraft you ever flew? The first aircraft I ever flew was a Piper Cub. It is an older training aircraft with a high wing, single engine, two-blade propeller, and a tail dragger configuration. And that was the aircraft I flew for the first time. 46. Have you ever used English on the radio during a flight? Yes, I have used English on the radio during flights. I usually try to communicate in English with ATC, especially during approach, departure, and center communications, in order to practice and improve my English during flight operations. 47. Tell me about the worst accident you've ever heard of. The worst accident I have ever heard of occurred in 1977 at Los Rodeos Airport in Tenerife, when two Boeing 747 aircraft collided on the runway. It became the deadliest accident in aviation history, mainly caused by low visibility conditions and miscommunication between the flight crews and ATC. 48. Were you influenced by someone to become a pilot? Yes, I was influenced by someone to become a pilot. A neighbor of mine was a cadet at the Air Force Academy, and his inspired me. After that, I became interested in aviation and decided to study in this field. 49. How was the beginning of your career in aviation? The beginning of my career in aviation was challenging because I didn't have enough financial resources to pay for all the training. My family and colleagues helped me during that period, so I am very grateful to everyone who supported me at that time. Consequences 50. How dangerous is it when a pilot doesn't know his correct airspeed? The consequences can be loss of aircraft control, stall, tail strike, and runway excursion. This event happens especially during critical phases of flight, such as takeoff and landing. 51. What's a near miss and why is it dangerous? A near miss occurs when two aircraft pass very close to each other, creating a potentially hazardous situation. It is dangerous because it can result from miscommunication, distraction, or loss of situational awareness, especially in congested terminal or busy airports. 52. What's a laser strike and why is it dangerous? A laser strike occurs when someone points a laser at an aircraft and blinding the pilot. The consequences can be disorientation, loss of situational awareness, potentially loss of control, and it most commonly happens at low altitudes during approach or departure. 53. What are the consequences of radar contact loss in a TMA? The consequences may be reduced situational awareness for ATC, increased aircraft separation, and pilots need to report their position frequently to the controller, maintain safe separation. 54. What else may happen after a lightning strike? The consequences may be temporary instrument failures, system malfunctions, structural damage, and in some cases, pilot disorientation after a lightning strike. 55. How dangerous is incorrect airspeed information? The consequences can be loss of aircraft control, stall, tail strike, and runway excursion. This event happens especially during critical phases of flight, such as takeoff and landing. How can instrument malfunctions threaten safety? Instrument malfunctions can threaten safety by causing loss of situational awareness and increased cockpit workload. The pilot needs to revert to basic or visual references and to land as soon as possible to resolve the problem. 57. What are the risks of emergency descent? The risks of emergency descent may include passenger injury, structural stress on the aircraft, and terrain or obstacle hazards, especially if the descent is not properly managed. 58. What happens if oil pressure drops? If oil pressure drops, the consequences may be engine damage or engine failure and require an immediate emergency landing to maintain safety all operation. 59. How does engine failure affect performance at high altitude? At high altitude, an engine failure reduces aircraft performance, especially climb capability. The pilot may need to perform a drift down to a lower altitude and carefully manage power settings to maintain safe flight. 60. How dangerous is low oil pressure? Why? Low oil pressure is very dangerous because it can cause severe engine damage due to insufficient lubrication, leading to overheating and possible engine failure. 61. What are consequences of overweight landing? The consequences of operating an aircraft overweight can be structural damage, excessive brake overheating during landing, and an increased risk of tire blowout due to higher loads. 62. What may happen with hydraulic failure? The consequences of a hydraulic failure may include partial or total loss of flight controls, landing gear malfunction, and degraded or inoperative braking systems. So the pilot should follow abnormal procedures and check aircraft performance procedures. 63. When should a pilot perform a missed approach procedure? The pilot should perform a missed approach when weather conditions are below minimums, the approach becomes unstable, or any abnormal situation occurs during the final approach. 64. How does a pilot prepare for a go-around procedure? A pilot prepares for a go-around by reviewing and briefing the missed approach chart, including headings, altitudes, turns, and crew responsibilities. This preparation ensures a coordinated and safe execution if a go-around becomes necessary. 65. What actions should a pilot take when there is a fire on board? So first of all, the pilot should immediately execute the memory items and then follow fire on board checklist. The pilot must inform ATC, declare an emergency, and request fire and rescue services upon landing. 66. How do airports mitigate the risk of bird strikes? Airports mitigate the risk of bird strikes through wildlife management programs, including the use of birds of prey, drones, lasers, and fireworks. These measures reduce bird presence in critical airport areas. 67. What safety rules should be observed during passenger boarding? During passenger boarding, safety rules include proper use of seatbelts and oxygen masks when required, correct stowage of baggage, keeping aisles clear, and ensuring exits door are unblocked if necessary. 68. How do you usually prepare yourself for a flight? I prepare myself by ensuring adequate rest, at least 8 hours of sleep, and eating light meals. I also maintain physical and mental fitness before the flight. 69. What are the advantages and disadvantages of being a pilot? The advantages of being a pilot include traveling to different places and experiencing new people and cultures. The disadvantages can be fatigue, stress, and spending long periods away from family. 70. What are the biggest difficulties to become a pilot? The biggest difficulties in becoming a pilot are the high cost of training, the large of regulations to study, and the need to keep licenses and qualifications regularly updated. 71. How long does it usually take for someone to become a pilot? It usually takes several years to become a pilot, depending on training place and budget. In most cases, around 3 to 5 years is a common time to obtain all licenses and before start a career. 72. Tell me about the equipment you are currently flying. I am currently flying the Cessna Citation 680, which is a mid-size business jet belongs to Cessna manufactured. It carries around 10 passengers, has long-range endurance, and it is operating on short runways. 73. What are your first actions when you arrive at the airport? My first actions are to check the pre-flight inspection, fuel planning, weather conditions, flight plan, NOTMs, airport briefing. After reviewing this information, I share it with my colleague and conduct a good crew briefing. 74. What are the challenges of flying internationally? The challenges of flying internationally include complying with different regulations, planning fuel and flight routes, and monitoring different meteorological conditions. Pilots must be familiar with special procedures specific to each country or airport. 75. How should a pilot deal with stressful situations? In a stressful situation, a pilot should remain calm, apply CRM principles, and communicate clearly with the crew. Effective manage and solve the situation safely. 76. How prepared do you consider yourself to deal with critical emergencies? In a critical emergency situation, I should remain calm, apply CRM principles, and communicate clearly with the crew. Effective management and teamwork help resolve the situation safely. 77. Are you currently working as a pilot? Yes, of course. I am currently working as a pilot, my main based in Rio de Janeiro at SBJR Airport. I operate as a corporate pilot on a mid-size Cessna Citation 600 and a Super King Air turboprop. 78. How should a pilot handle pressure from the employer? A pilot should handle pressure from an employer, prioritizing safety and complying with ANAC regulations and policies. Safety must come first, regardless employer pressure. 79. Do you think all ATC communications in Brazil should be conducted in English? Why? I believe ATC communication in Brazil should be conducted in English in controlled airspace, especially Class A, B, and C. English promotes standardized communication and enhances safety for international traffic. 80. What do you consider the worst part of being a pilot? The worst part of being a pilot is spending long periods away from family and carrying a high level of responsibility for the aircraft, crew, and passengers. Managing unexpected problems during flight can also be challenging. 81. Why is it important for you to succeed at this test? This test is important to me because it allows me to fly internationally and maintain active language proficiency. It also develops my resume and supports my long-term career in aviation. 82. What do you consider a dream aircraft to fly? Why? My dream aircraft to fly is the Gulfstream G650, an ultra-long-range business jet with high-performance technology. It carries around 15 passengers, it uses 2 turbofan engines, and operates worldwide. 83. How do you get ready to fly early in the morning? To get ready for an early morning flight, I ensure at least 8 hours of good sleep and eat light meals the night before. In the morning, I stay calm, have a proper breakfast, and prepare mentally to fly safely. 84. What's CRM and why is it important? CRM, or Crew Resource Management, is a tool that improves communication and teamwork by promoting effective information sharing among crew members. It is important because it supports decision-making and enhances safety in the cockpit. 85. How can companies help pilots improve safety? Companies can improve safety investing in recurrent training, simulator programs, and a safety culture. Encouraging open reporting and non-punitive feedback and also helps identify and mitigate risks. 86. What's a sterile cockpit and why is it important? The sterile cockpit restricts non-essential communication during critical phases of flight below 10,000 feet. It is important because it reduces distractions and helps pilots focus on procedures. 87. In what circumstances would you reject a takeoff? Rejected takeoff may be performed this way: engine failure, engine fire, warning alerts, unsafe to fly. This action is normally taken below V1, in accordance with standard procedures. 88. How can runway incursions be avoided? Runway incursions may be avoided through good situational awareness, accurate ATC communication, correct and readback of clearances. Standard taxi and special procedures is also essential. 89. Why do pilots sometimes need to jettison fuel? Pilots may jettison fuel to reduce aircraft weight before landing and avoid an overweight landing. This helps prevent structural damage, excessive brake stress, and the risk of tire blowout. 90. Why does a pilot need to descend in sudden decompression? In sudden decompression, a pilot must descend rapidly to a safe altitude. This action prevents hypoxia and ensures adequate oxygen for the crew members and passengers. 91. How important is flight attendant training? Flight attendant training is essential for emergency response and passenger safety. It ensures proper monitoring of the cabin and clear on correct procedures and behavior during all phases of flight. 92. How can ATC help during an engine failure? Flight attendant training is essential for emergency response and passenger safety. It ensures proper cabin monitoring and clear guidance on correct procedures and behavior during all phases of flight. 93. When can ATC instructions be disregarded? ATC instructions may be disregarded in specific situations to maintain flight safety, such as avoiding terrain, traffic collision, or severe weather wind shear, thunderstorms. In these cases, the pilot must prioritize safety and inform ATC as soon as possible. 94. What actions should a pilot take with fire on board? Fire on board, the pilot should immediately execute the memory items and follow the manufacturer's checklist. The pilot must declare an emergency, land as soon as possible, and request fire and rescue services upon landing. 95. For what reasons may airports close? Airports may close due to severe weather conditions, accidents, runway contamination, security threats, or maintenance activities. 96. What systems are affected by electrical failure? An electrical failure affects systems such as flight instruments, lighting, navigation, and communication equipment. However, most aircraft are equipped with standby or emergency systems to maintain essential functions. 97. When do pilots need longer runways? Pilots need a longer runway when aircraft weight is high, temperatures are elevated, or airport elevation is high. Degraded aircraft systems can also increase takeoff or landing distance requirements. 98. How does training prepare for pilot incapacitation? Training prepares pilots to handle pilot incapacitation by practicing standard procedures. It ensures the remaining pilot can follow manufacturer and company policies to conduct a safe landing. 99. What should pilots do after bird ingestion on climb? After a bird ingestion during climb, the pilot should follow the engine failure or abnormal procedure and execute the appropriate checklist. The pilot must inform ATC and plan a safe return, preparing for a single-engine landing procedures. 100. How would you react to total FMS failure? FMS failure, I would fly the aircraft using standby instruments and raw data navigation. I would inform ATC, request vectors if necessary, and conduct a conventional or visual approach procedures. 101. What can a pilot do in dual-engine failure? Dual-engine failure, the pilot should maintain aircraft control, execute the memory items, and declare Mayday. The pilot must inform ATC, use oxygen masks if required, descend to low altitude, and attempt an engine restart in accordance with QRH. 102. What does it mean to be under radar vectors? Being under radar vectors means following headings, altitudes, and instructions provided by ATC for navigation and traffic separation. The pilot complies with ATC guidance at all times. 103. How can mid-air collision risk be reduced? Mid-air collision risk can be reduced by strictly following ATC instructions and maintaining proper separation. Continuous use of TCAS, situational awareness, especially during takeoff and approach.